Good morning, party people, and welcome to Office Hours. I switched cameras recently, so I've got a little bit more of a wide angle lens. I need to aim this thing a little bit more flat so that the room is straight, but also because it's a really super wide angle lens, it kind of gives a little bit of a curve to the room too as well. So it gives you one of these days, I need to walk y'all through everything that's on my little streamer wall there behind me. When I first set up this home office, I purposely did that so that I could have more stuff in the background that kind of showed off my personality, and I've had a good time with that. So let's go through your top voted questions from over at PollGab and see what we've got here. The first one, Eve asks, no relation to my Eve, asks, when should you or should you not execute the recommended missing indexes in the estimated or execution plan? So the thing with those index recommendations is that they're just a comma delimited list of columns to consider indexing. They're not in the right order. If you read the manual, and of course that's just a hypothetical, rhetorical kind of thing, you're not actually going to read the manual. You and I both know you very well. If you read the manual, then you'll find out that that is just a comma delimited list of columns to consider indexing. They're not in the right order. Just because you can hit execute on it and it compiles and executes doesn't mean it was designed to hit execute on. So in my Fundamentals of Index Tuning class, I talk about how we start to reorganize those columns in the right order. Every now and then someone will say in the TikTok replays especially, they're like, why don't you give me all the answers in 90 seconds? Why can't you just tell me everything? Well, because it's hard to put the columns in the right order. I tell you what, that's one of my favorite interview questions with database administrators, because database administrators will tell me, I'm ready to jump straight to your mastering classes. The best litmus test for that is to ask them, when you get an index recommendation request, what order do you put the columns in? And if they answer, it's based on if they answer saying it's based on the selectivity of the columns, and I'll find out by querying the database to see which one has the most distinct values, then I know they're wrong, and it's time for them to attend my fundamentals classes rather than the mastering classes. Kind of mind-blowing, because most DBAs think that's how it works. Next up, MyTeaGotCold says, I'm logging, I forgot to start recording questions. I need to go start recording those. I'm logging SP who is active and SP Blitz first to a table, or you recommend doing that. Do you still bother with versions that support Query Store? Yes, for several reasons. One is that most people don't turn on Query Store. Another is that Query Store only gathers a relatively limited amount of data. It doesn't show you, for example, how blocking interacts between sessions, doesn't give you server level wait stats, doesn't track multi-database queries the way that I would want it to. There's a huge litany of reasons. We got people trickling in now live on Twitch. Now we have Spitfire, Gustav, Jim Van Allen. Howdy, folks. Welcome to the show. The Kazik has subscribed with Prime for 7 months. Thank you. Very cool. Those of you who have Amazon Prime, you could subscribe to any Twitch channel for free. You get one Twitch subscription absolutely for free when you link your Twitch and Amazon accounts. Twitch is owned by Amazon, which is kind of funny to see. Next up, Frozt asks, Jim Van Allen too. Woo! Welcome, Seismophone, first-time chatter. Welcome into the show. Frost asks, hi, I've got a database where the availability group is not an automatic failover because of dependencies on reporting services. Are there other options to make the availability group highly available and reporting services as well? What you want to do is you want to separate out the SQL conceptually. It doesn't have to be on different hardware, but conceptually separate out database high availability and reporting services high availability. The way that you make databases highly available is you do things like failover clustering, always on availability groups. When you want to make reporting services highly available, what you do is you stand up a bunch of them. Stand up 2, 3, 4 VMs that are all running reporting services, and you put them behind a load balancer. And you have the load balancer detect when one of the servers goes offline. So that way you can patch them independently. You can have one of them just crash and people won't even know. But the way that you do that is conceptually differently. Just because they're both the same product name, that they both start with SQL Server, doesn't mean you use the same HA and DR tactics for all of those services. Same thing with integration services. The way that you make that highly available is totally different again as well. Next up, GrumpyDBA gives me a wall of T-SQL and asks why something gets declared. So the tough thing with interpreting T-SQL is I don't get things like line endings and formatting, so it's not really a good question to ask over in PoulGab. If you want to get an answer on stuff like this, one of your best options is dba.stackexchange or SQLServerCentral.com. The one thing that I will caution you, though, about GrumpyOldDBA is you say why. The only people who can answer why questions is Microsoft, because every now and then someone will say, why does it this way? Why does this behave this way? Why is a why did Microsoft choose to do it this way? And none of us can really give you a good answer for that. Howdy, Ren. Good to see you. Eli Prairie. That's a cool name for it. I like that. Luis asks, hi, Brent. Why does sometimes CPU time higher than elapsed time? Well, let's think through that. How could a query use more CPU time than the time on the clock? If a query took, say, 5 seconds in order to run, how might it use 10 CPU seconds or 15 CPU seconds? You've got multiple CPUs. You've got multiple CPU cores, all of which can be working simultaneously when a query goes parallel. So your query went parallel and used CPU time across several cores. Oh, Mean Gene asks a tough one. So do physical reads ever matter when I'm doing query tuning or just logical reads? When I'm getting started with people and I'm teaching them how to do query tuning for the first time, I need to give them one metric. I need to give them one metric to focus on. And the one metric that I give them to focus on has been for decades logical reads, because it's easy to measure. It's consistent no matter what kind of hardware you're running on, whether you're running on a big beefy box or a really tiny laptop. That helps you a lot too when your development and production servers are wildly different. Now, having said that, now that I'm switching over more to Postgres, I actually tend to use a completely different metric than reads altogether. I use query runtime or CPU time. Because these days in the age of the cloud, when you make your query read less data, that doesn't necessarily translate to reduced cloud provider bills. And often up in the cloud, what people are trying to do is get their servers to run more queries concurrently at a lower cost. And for that, CPU time has been a big, more effective thing for me there. I'm not probably going to ever go back and re-record all my training and like rebias it over towards CPU time. But between the metrics that are out there, I put logical reads first because it's easy and consistent regardless of the hardware that you're using. And then I would probably put CPU time second. Physical reads would be way lower on the list of things for me to monitor. Next up, BBK asks, what performs better, a materialized view for a specific query or a non-clustered index with included columns for the same query? If the query has group by, if the query spans multiple tables, then those are scenarios where materialized views can be much more effective and faster because those are tools, the things that materialized views can optimize, group bys, sums, joins between multiple tables that a non-clustered index can't do. Luis asks, hi Brent, is it good or bad to put the same column in more than one index? It's completely fine. It's neither good nor bad. It's like saying, is it a good or bad to use a screwdriver to build a house? It's just one of the many tools that you use while you're building a house. You will absolutely put a column in multiple indexes depending on the design of your database, but it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just a tool. Oh, Chris asks, hey Brent, in a previous office hours, you hinted at a potential Mastering Columnstore class. Is this still on the horizon? Yes, just based on scheduling, I've had a tough time getting that one shipped, but it is still on the horizon. I just don't announce dates for those. Ignacio says, what is your opinion of Azure SQL Database Watcher? So Microsoft tends to bring out monitoring products to check a box, and then they don't put a lot of work in it after it ships. MOM was one of them, System Center Operations Manager, Microsoft Performance Data Warehouse, or Management Data Warehouse. I think they called it Performance Data Warehouse, or Management Data Warehouse. See, I don't even remember what the product name was. And I think this might be one of those tools. And the reason why I think it might be one of those tools is this tool shipped without even having alerts. There couldn't be a more accurate product name. It literally watches the database, doesn't tell you anything, but just keeps watching. If you need me, I'll be over here just watching the database. What the hell good is that? Who would put any work into using a monitoring tool that just watches? I'm not going to kink shame. I mean, if you like to watch, that's totally cool, but it's not really a commercially viable opportunity. I'm going to watch your database. If you need me, I'll be watching. That's idiotic. That makes no sense. There's my feeling about that. Paul says, my friend asked me if it'll make sense to delete auto-generated statistics on a regular basis. No, because Microsoft SQL Server and Azure SQL DB will automatically add new statistics, even if a column is only queried one time. If someone runs just one query against it, the stat will come right back from the dead, plus you'll have to wait for that stat to be auto-created for that query to run, so that doesn't make any sense. Gustav asks over in Twitch chat, I'm writing my DP300s soon. Is it still good to go for certs? There's a question related to that, so I'm going to pull it up. Jökull. Jökull asks, what is your opinion of Microsoft certifications related to SQL Server? It seems like an opportunity to learn, then forget. If you're applying for a job from a stranger, if you're having to talk to a complete stranger and prove your worth, certificates can help you get a leg in that door, or a foot in that door, wherever that saying goes. I would argue, though, that if you're applying for jobs from strangers, you're screwed already. You're going to be going against a long line of people who all have that cert, and you need other ways to differentiate yourself. Personally, the thing I can't recommend enough is blogging. Go start blogging or start presenting. Blogging's an easier way in the door. And that will get you much closer to the front of the line, because there won't be nearly as many job candidates who can say, here's my blog, here's what I've written and shared about SQL Server proving, or Azure SQL DB, proving what I know. So that's my 2 cents there. Next up, Mailbox says, hi Brent, do you think the average DBA salary has decreased since 2005? Absolutely not, and I have the numbers to prove it. Go to brentozar.com/go/salary, where we conduct an annual salary survey, totally open source, data's open source, and DBA salaries have been going up every year since we started doing the survey. Now, you could argue that relative to inflation, maybe they didn't go up. I haven't run those calculations, of course. It'll depend on your location, where you are. But if you want to run those analysis, you can certainly do that using the open source data there at brentozar.com/go/salary. Now I'm seeing the average come down to like 78,000 in your area. That might be for posted jobs, but it's certainly not the average for DBA jobs overall, at least across the United States. And we'll do a couple more. Mailbox says, hey, Brent, given the news about Broadcom discontinuing the free version of ESXi, what do you think the impact will be to the on-premises SQL Server DBA crowd? To me, it makes no difference. For a long time, virtual or SQL Server has kind of defaulted to being in virtual machines first and physical boxes last. It doesn't really matter to us. We have to run on an operating system, and I don't really care what the operating system costs or how it's managed. That's kind of up to the sysadmins. It's not like we can opt out of running under an operating system. DadJoker says, recently the brilliant Steve Sanderson did a demo about vector search. Have you seen more demand for semantic search inside SQL Server? I don't know what those things are, so no clue. Absolutely no idea on that one. Paul asks a really interesting question. Is there a way to get information about how often the stats of a table have been updated and how much time was spent on those updates? By default, out of the box, no. But if you're using Ola Hollengren's maintenance scripts, you can. Ola Hollengren's maintenance scripts use this thing called command execute every time that they run commands. And they can optionally log it to table. So check out the configurations on Ola Hollengren's maintenance scripts. I have clients who've used it for exactly that kind of thing. They wanted to find out which indexes and which stats were the most resource intensive to keep up to date. So it's really useful there. But it is left as an exercise for the reader. You have to write the scripts or write the queries against the database to group those together. Jay Mycock says over at Twitch, sorry if this has been asked, but do you plan on expanding training materials to Azure SQL DB? I've actually blogged about this. So the problem with Azure SQL DB is Microsoft can change anything in there at any given time. They don't really document too much about what they changed. The servers can restart at any given time, and they do, losing you all your metrics. So it's really hard to do a good job of performance tuning Azure SQL DB. It's hard to generalize stuff when the environment keeps changing. Having said that, I'm doing in about an hour here, I'm going to do a consulting engagement on Azure SQL DB. Also, I'm going to say something that's going to kind of piss off some of the Microsoft folks in the crowd. Azure SQL DB has very low market penetration compared to SQL Server or other databases. Postgres, cough. So if I'm going to go write training material, I want to do it in the most profitable and rewarding way. And frankly, that's why I started switching gears over to Postgres, is that I don't want to pour a bunch of blood, sweat, and tears into Azure SQL DB only to have 5 people go and buy that training class. It's not that I think it's a bad product. I think it's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But the market just spoke in such a resounding voice that it's just not a popular product compared to either Postgres or box product SQL Server. Is what it is there. Chandwich asks, hey Brent, when do we get a tour of the office/home/garage? I kind of go both ways on that. I don't want to feel like I'm bragging because I have a nice house. It's not an amazing house, but it's a pretty nice house. And I don't want to be seen like MTV Cribs. Yo, dog, here's my amazing car collection, houses or whatever. I might do an office hours from the garage. I've thought about setting up a desk inside there. Right now it's kind of cramped because I have 2 long cars. I have a 1992 Cadillac that's really, really long. I have a 2024 Land Rover Defender that's really, really big. So it's kind of blocky inside the garage. But I've thought about it. I just don't think I'm going to do that. Surly Dev says doing office hours from the car in the lounge. You know, it's so funny. I didn't think about that, and I totally should. I should totally do an office hours from the Porsche Speedster replica that I have in the dining room right now, especially because I think we're going to move that out of the dining room and swap it out with another car. We're in the midst of planning the wrap for our Porsche 356 Coupe. We have a 1964 Porsche 356 SC. And we're getting ready to wrap it in Gulf blue, like it's like a light, like a Tiffany blue or a baby blue, and then do the Gulf livery. But we're thinking about doing it with markers. There's this really cool paint marker technique that makes a car look like it's driven off of a manga cartoon, which we might end up doing. We'll see how that works. And then we'll do one more. Let's see here. MustangKirby asks, I have hundreds of customer databases on several servers. Company policy says the databases must not be deleted if they're currently used. Other than taking them offline, is there a way to determine the last time a database was accessed? There are many, so I'm just gonna dump a bunch of options out here just to get you started. Auditing, profiler traces, sysdmdb index operational stats will track which time indexes have been queried. The plan cache. So you can go at it from any one of those ways depending on which one suits your goals the most. Start there. Okay, there we go. We've been going for a fan blowing behind your hair. That would be pretty funny. So we've been going for about 20 minutes there. We'll call it quits on this episode. I will go prep for my client this morning doing performance tuning up in Azure SQL DB. Thanks for hanging out with me today at Office Hours, and I will see you all on the next one. Adios, folks.